Yes, peace and blessings, family. This is Malik Ishmael of the Vanguard Show, episode number 50. And I'm joined by a very special guest, Brother Harold Shujaa Baker. And I'm going to make sure he corrects me if I'm wrong on the Shujaa. But he's a writer, he's an activist, he's an engineer, educator, and author of Building on the Work of Our Elders and Ancestors, Merging STEM with Kawaida, and he'll correct me wrong if I'm wrong on that word, Kawaida, to elevate Blackness, as well as the creator of Nguzo Saba 365. So welcome to the stage, Brother Harold, and we're going to put him on right now.
Greetings,
brother. How are you? Peace and blessings, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing well, good brother. Peace and blessings to you. It's good to be here with you today. I feel honored to have the opportunity to talk to you, brother.
Yes, brother. It's been a long time coming because I've known about you forever, but I think this is the first, at least in terms of seeing each other, we've got a chance to kind of see each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've been friends out in social media and had several different interactions out there, shared a lot of good information, and know a lot of the same people. As a matter of fact,
that's right.
You know? Yeah, so
that's
it's
right.
a good opportunity to connect. And you were correct in all of the pronunciations. Shujaa.
I want to make sure. Brother.
yeah. Well, you know, names are an important thing to African people, man. People connected to the culture, you know, and pronunciations are key, you know, in order to convey that spirit that goes along with those names. So, but you got it correct. Shujaa is my chosen name, of course, you know, and my people who I do my work with know me by that almost exclusively. And Harold is my birth name, and I still keep them all because, you know, it's all part of my story and who I am, you know. And then, of course, you were correct in pronouncing the name of Kawaida, the philosophy.
Okay, brother, I've been around a little bit, so I catch on, and it sticks with me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And one quick question before we delve into your extraordinary work. Did you remember a brother named Sabira Kanifu? Sabira Kanifu.
Sabira Kanifu. I can't say I recall Sabira Kanifu. I know of a couple other Sabiras, though.
Okay.
And there's always the chance that, you know, I may have known Sabira Kanifu, just didn't have that last name that I also knew as well, you know. But tell me about him, can you? Is there what's the reference?
Well, what it is that when the Panther Vanguard movement we had a function at Compton College, and we gave away either 2, 3, or 5,000 bags of free food to needy families, as well as a program. And he was on the program, and he invited myself and the Vanguard leadership to come speak during Kwanzaa.
Okay.
In which I definitely honored that speaking invitation, and me and him were really cool, brother. I don't know, you know, since I left Los Angeles, we really hadn't been able to connect because this is kind of pre-social media. So I was just wondering if you had known the brother.
Oh, okay, yeah, I understand. No, and I had crossed paths with that good brother, but that's an excellent program that you describe in there, and it's always good to know people know of and know people doing good work like that.
Oh, right on, brother, right on. And let's get right into it, brother. But first, I want to kind of get into your origin because I've always thought you were from Los Angeles. Give a little bit about your background, what brought you to LA, and then, of course, we got to see what brought you into consciousness.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, of course, my story begins in Detroit, Michigan. I'm born and raised on the east side of Detroit. I've been out in California for what seems like forever. You know, I got out here in 2003, so I've been out here for over 20 years now, and my entire cultural activist life sort of is out here. You know, of course, I started coming into consciousness before I got out here, but and with Detroit being my home, but my whole life of, you know, cultural study and community work is out in California. So that's why it might seem like, you know, my beginnings are here, but that's where it began for me. East side of Detroit, that's where I began, you know, going through of course, the public school system there, and got my foundation in the engineering career that I've enjoyed for, you know, many decades and all of that. And of course, got the cultural grounding because Detroit is a Black city.
Yes.
And, that's unmistakable. you know.
Yeah.
And I got my initial exposure to the teachings there. I began studying Minister Malcolm there. I was raised on Dr. King, you know. We all get that, you know.
Right.
And then I became aware. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X for the first time in the 11th grade. And after studying Dr. King my whole life, I got a new message and a new flavor and a new spirit, you know, from the work that Malcolm was, from Malcolm's life and the perspective that he projected. And it's been the center. Malcolm's teachings have been the center of my cultural activist thought, you know, always have been. And that was even the case. I write about this in my book about how that preceded my exposure to Dr. Karenga, my meeting Dr. Karenga, and my becoming familiar with his teachings through Kawita philosophy and all of that. And that's where it began for me, you know, that's where it began for me.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, you're kind of breaking up a little bit. So, but I think I got the gist of what you're talking about here. You still with me?
Yes, I am. I can hear you clearly. I can hear you clearly.
Can you hear
and
me?
I can see, yes, I can. I can hear you clearly, and I can see your video very clearly. I haven't had a breakup.
Okay, all right. We seem to be good.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Maybe it's just on my end because we got some. I got some terrible Wi-Fi over here, brother. So we're gonna have to work on that.
Okay.
But now that you said that, brother, how did your book and the overall project originate?
Well, it's an extension of what I began talking about a moment ago. You know, my introduction to have an opportunity to meet Dr. Karenga, become a student, develop an appreciation and a deep knowledge of Kawita philosophy. And that began in 2005. I mentioned that I came to California in 2003. When 2005 was when I had opportunity to meet Dr. Karenga, talk to him for the first time, and be inspired by the wisdom that he shared. You know, had the opportunity to talk to him to find out what the foundation was of the message that he was bringing. And, you know, in simple terms, he told me that this is our people, brother. You know, this is Africa talking here, you know, ancient Yoruba land, you know, and ancient Kemet. You know, this is South Africa. This is Zulu land talking, you know. Gave me that type of perspective. And my question to him was, well, how can I learn more? You know, and that led to me taking my first class with him at Cal State Long Beach in spring 2005. And I took a follow-up class with him in the fall of that year, and then became a regular at his cultural center out here in Los Angeles. And eventually I was a member of the US organization for about 5 years. So I got deep into Kawita studies, you know, had a deep appreciation for the work that I thought Dr. Karenga had brought forward and was putting together. I had a deep appreciation for its call for continuous development, you know, and the need for other people to make contributions to help it reach its full potential. In that way, I'm an engineer, you know, been an engineer for 40 years. So I take that with me everywhere I go. And I was able to quickly assess that there was a lack or a need, I should say, for that scientific or engineering perspective there, you know. So I was excited about the potential that I could add, that I could bring to it, and all of that. So without boring you with all of the details of that, you know, that led to a good relationship with Dr. Karenga, a longtime student of his. I had proposed many different things to be done, you know, when I was affiliated with the organization in terms of making that connection to technology that I'm speaking about. That eventually led to me being invited to do an update to the official Kwanzaa website. We did that in 2017 and 2018. And then to speak directly to your question in my book, in 2019, Dr. Karenga invited me to participate in a book anthology project. This was where longtime students of the teachings of Kawita were being asked to write a Kawita a Kawita interpretation of the social issues that affect our profession, you know. So I was the only engineer involved. So I was invited to write a STEM interpretation, or to make it plain, a ethical narrative on how STEM should be applied. You know, what Africa teaches us about how we should go about bringing and introducing science, technology, engineering, applied mathematics to the world, what the outcome of that should be, and how that should differ from what we get, you know, from the dominant culture, you know, and the way they go about doing it. So I wrote a 30-page paper on that, and then I wrote a and then wrote a 30-page follow-up, you know, about practical application of those things, you know, and that became my book. My book is set up in two different major parts, where the first part is me going through Dr. Karanga's writings and all of the Kawita scholarship that exists, and extracting the teachings that apply to STEM, you know, and how it should be brought forward and applied. So I extracted a set of principles, practices, criticisms, goals, you know, that relate to how we should go about developing STEM. And that's all characterized in the first part of the book. And then in the second part, to speak broadly, it's a summary of how we have applied those teachings in our work, you know, in the course of developing our own Kwanzaa themed website, developing an app to promote the 7 principles, and, you know, as a daily vocation, as opposed to just celebrating them, you know, during the 7 days of Kwanzaa. You know, they have their greatest meaning if we apply them daily, right? So we're using these teachings, you know, in the book in a practical way, and explaining how we're, you know, and in the book I explain how we do all of that. So that's sort of a summation of the book, how it came about, you know, and how it relates to, you know, my experience with Kawita philosophy and the teachings.
Okay. And before we transition to the next question, first, where can people get your book? And then number 2, the acronym STEM. Explain that.
All right, excellent. I'll start with that. STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. In our conversation, we take math to be an inherent part of all of those disciplines, right? And we also advocate that we need to develop a focus on manufacturing. So for us, in my conversation, STEM means science, technology, engineering, and math and manufacturing. You know, that's the focus. We don't exclude math. You know, we engage math continuously, but we want to highlight that need to focus on manufacturing. And my book is available in 2 places. It's available on Amazon. You could do a search for my name or for the title of the book, Building on the Work of Our Elders and Ancestors, Merging STEM with Kawita to Elevate Blackness and Everything Else. Or you could go to our website, Kwanzaa.org, or nguzosaba365.org, and you could access a link to purchase the book.
Okay. And brother, also, what is your related background in that regard?
Well, I've been a electromechanical design engineer for 40 years. I got started in 1985.
Okay.
And I've done everything from space shuttle flight experiment design to commercial product design. Right now, I'm helping to design gravity-based energy storage systems and the equipment that's necessary to manufacture them. I've helped design a cancer treatment center and a broad range of things. So I got a 40-year plus track record in STEM. And I've also had stints as a web developer and animated, you know, doing animated graphics. I still do a little bit of animated graphics. People can go to my website, vdandp.com. That stands for Virtual Design and Prototyping.com, to get an example of some of the work that we've done and a list of some of our credentials. So that's where the STEM comes from, because I've been a STEM professional for over 40 years, you know, and I've been a student of the culture for 20 plus years, a rigorous student of the culture. And come to appreciate how our ancient, how our ancestors' grasp of STEM, science, technology, engineering, manufacturing, was central to the rise of Africa, you know, and believe that us reconnecting with that in the most meaningful way, not just as consumers, you know, or as victims or targets of technology, but as innovators, you know, us reconnecting with an understanding of ourselves as that is critical and essential to us making the transformation, you know, that we need to make, you know, within ourselves and within the community. So we promote that actively by example. You know what I mean? Our work is technology based, and it's clearly designed to uplift us culturally, you know, and socially in every way. So while we're advocating for doing that, we're trying to be a living example of it at the same time.
Oh, right on, brother. Well, I tell you, brother, I've been back and forth on the continent, and I see it in practical application there. Yeah. And even though we've developed a tremendous innovative culture, it always go back to the root culture. So you definitely have mastered that, brother. Definitely.
Yeah. I'm doing my best with it. There's a lot more, you know, to before I would claim absolute mastery. You know, I'm certainly comfortable with where I am in terms of the knowledge after so many years of applied work. But you know, how it is, the more you learn, the less you realize you know. You know,
exactly, right.
As it goes. So you know, I'm like you, brother. I'm humble with the knowledge and keep pursuing it. You know,
I'm humble too, brother. But my wife will say different sometimes.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, next question, but I wanted to see what are your primary objectives, or what do you hope to accomplish through this effort?
Well, mainly, brother, I mean, I was watching, and if you don't mind this brief aside, I was watching a recording of Baba Roy Ayers the other day, who recently made his transition. And he's part of the soundtrack of my life, you know what I mean? From my earliest days. So when people like that make their transition, you know, we spend, you know, time reflecting on that. I mean, when Frankie Beverly left us, man, I was gone for 40 days. You know what I mean?
Me too, brother. Me too.
but Roy Ayers made a statement, and he was talking about what his ultimate objective was with his music, you know, and he reduced it to these simplest terms. He said, I just wanted to help my people, you know, I wanted to help my people the best way that I can with what I had. You know, and that's what we're trying to accomplish through this work. We're trying to help our people in the most meaningful way that we can with what we have. And I say we because this is not a project that's, you know, just exclusively about me. We have a team. We are a group of people, you know, myself, my brother-in-law, 25-year-old tech genius. My wife is part of this. My sister-in-law is part of this. It's a family affair in meaningful ways. I got long-term friends, Dr. Carl Quayle Duncan and his wife Kathy. They're part of this. Minister from Wosay, Bill. He's also an engineer. He's part of this. You know, we have several people who are contributing to this, and it's a labor of love for us. My sister Tiffany Rashawn is a part of this, you know, making a contribution to our children's literacy efforts. So what we hope to accomplish by this is to make a meaningful contribution to our people, to help uplift us in the most meaningful way by making us reflect on who we are and connecting this with an understanding of who we have been, because as the Honorable Marcus Garvey teaches us, people can do what people have done. So there's the value in understanding that history, you know, as STEM innovators and in all of the most meaningful ways. So we believe, and I've been able to convince my team, they feel about it like I do. I was really inspired by the simplicity and the depth of the 7 principles, you know. I was impressed by the institution that had been created to carry it forward. And give us occasion to engage with it on a regular basis. You know what I mean? Through the holiday Kwanzaa.
Right.
I was
Right.
impressed. I was impressed that the teachings, while they certainly have been linked to an African foundation, they are ultimately universal. In their meaning and in their application. So any good human being can see the value in the 7 principles as they're constructed. So, and I also felt that that they had not yet been packaged, so to speak, or presented in a way that had the opportunity for the biggest response. Like when you go out on the internet and do a search for Kwanzaa, the 7 principles, you find, the official Kwanzaa website, and you'll find a few other, themed websites. But for the significance that the holiday and the teachings hold for me, I didn't feel like there was adequate representation out there for it,
All right.
So we wanted to develop, we wanted to use our command of the technology, to merge the most current technology, with the teachings in the most meaningful way, and create the biggest possible engagement with it. We wanted to expand people's understanding of it and engagement with it in every way possible, by connecting it with modern technology, by talking more broadly about where the holiday came from, and the people who helped bring it into being, by addressing some of the things that limit people's engagement with it, and purposely cause people to walk away from it, or to speak against it, those things. So that's what we were trying to do, with it, and what we hope to accomplish.
Okay, right on, man. Wonderfully said as well, brother.
Thank
Now,
you, brother.
your writings mention an effort to expand the people's understanding of the Kwanzaa creation story. What does that mean, actually?
Well, and that's I thank you for asking that question, and I kind of touched on that in my last response. That's we recognize Dr. Karenga for as a creator of the holiday, as the world does, But we also know, even from Dr. Karenga himself, that other people were involved in the creation of the holiday, and because the holiday has a communitarian focus, and even we quote Dr. Karenga in our work, where he says that history demands that all things be regarded as collectively produced. Great things are produced by a combination of efforts, people, and circumstances, and certainly Kwanzaa's coming into being was triggered by a series of things, and while Dr. Karenga played the biggest part in bringing it all together and led the effort, gave the primary ideas for it, and certainly has been its most active and meaningful ambassador over the last almost 60 years. What we mean is we talk a little bit, we talk about not just Dr. Karenga's contribution, but some of those other people. And mainly we're focusing on the children in this effort. We're trying to make the holiday more appealing to children. And we happen to have some of the first children, so to speak, of Kwanzaa involved in our effort. The 10-year-old girl who inspired the creation of the holiday by asking the question, how do Africans celebrate holidays? She's on our team. I just talked to her this morning, as a matter of fact. So we're developing their story, and we have her brother and another one of her sisters, who was also, it was 7 children in that iconic first Kwanzaa photo, where the first Kwanzaa celebration was held at the Aquarian Center here in Los Angeles. And well, we have 3 of those children involved. Of course, they're respected elders now, but we have them as part of our effort, and they're lending their story to help us develop some children's content. So we then talk about you know, we share the same story about the creation of Kwanzaa that Dr. Karenga shared with me, that he would share with anybody if, you know, you ask him about the exact story.
Right.
And that includes this 10-year-old girl who was then known as Kinamo Damu. Her legal name is Terry Bandely.
Okay.
But we're telling her story. So she's a part of what we're doing now. So we're telling the story about how she and her dad and another lady named Kacheko Davis and a brother named George Sabira were part of the research group. You know, Kinamo or Terry, she inspired the work that the elders did. But part of that research that was led by Dr. Karenga included a lady named Kacheko Davis. It included Kinamo's dad, Ngao Damu, and it also included, and in fact was organized by a man by the name of George Sabira, who wrote a series of books on Black economics in the 1980s, by the way. So these people were part. So telling their story or mentioning their names, you know, kind of gives us an opportunity to have an expanded conversation about the holiday. Certainly, when we talk about the children's contribution and how, you know, the early focus was on not causing the children to miss out on the holiday fun. You know, if we didn't celebrate some of the other holidays, you know, keeping that in mind redirects us to the children, you know, on it. And that's what we're trying to do. So when we expand an understanding of the creation of Kwanzaa, we expand our conversation about Kwanzaa, you know, and we don't do this in a way to try to deny or limit in any way Dr. Karenga's leading contribution to it. You know, we don't deny him anything in this. You know, we just expand the conversation by talking about some of the other people and, you know, what we're able to do with that.
Okay. And brother, also I think Kwanzaa was started in 1966, if I'm correct, right?
That was the first Kwanzaa celebration. Yes, was in 1966.
Okay. And actually, I was pictured, I had spoken at 30th anniversary of Kwanzaa at the US organization. And there's a film called Black Candle, shows my wife and I being pictured as well. Powerful film. And it just was very inspirational how we were able to finally celebrate our culture through celebration.
Yes.
You know, through, you know, we look at Thanksgiving, Christmas, all these holidays are, you know, from other communities, and they were kind of imposed upon us, but yet to celebrate our culture through you know, a holiday time, if you will, is so important. Would you find that correct?
Oh, I agree. As a matter of fact, I alluded to that in my earlier comment. That was one of the things that I appreciated about the Nguzo Saba, and it's not only the work that had been done to promote it up to the point when I encountered it, but the potential that it had. You know, being connected with the holiday in that way and having that institution, you know, that celebration, you know, to be able to engage it, I thought was brilliant. And also a great foundation to begin working to make it a 365-day vocation. You know, we got this 7-day celebration coming up every year. What can we do in between, you know, with the rest of the year to connect it, you know, and make it a continuous effort. You know what I mean? So that's what our work is designed to do.
Right on, brother. That's awesome, man. And your book really speaks to that, brother. Your book describes the relationship you developed with a man named Professor Earl 5X Grant, who was Minister Malcolm's primary associate, the official photographer, and the VP of his organization of Afro-American Unity, OAAU, and how he helped you to, you know, resolve a potential conflict between Minister Malcolm's teachings and Kawida. Please explain.
Oh, well, I'll be glad to do that. I mean, this is one of those moments. This is one of those things that for people who have a deep appreciation for the people, in this case, Malcolm X, and the story, it's sort of an almost something you almost can't believe that would happen, you know, to be able to meet and have a personal relationship with a person who was so close, you know, to Malcolm. I mean, like I said, after reading the autobiography in the 11th grade, that was the beginning of me becoming what I refer to as a Malcolmist, you know.
Likewise.
And certainly,
yeah, definitely.
certainly by the time, and I've always been a student, so to speak. You know, I'm a constant reader, you know, even if I'm not pursuing a degree. I don't even have a degree, as a matter of fact, you know.
Right.
I'm self-trained all day. So I mean, I've been on this reading and self-education thing. So connecting that with Malcolm and then learning his story, being moved by him to the degree that I was, and then having the opportunity to meet Earl Grant, who was, as you mentioned, he was the vice president of Malcolm's organization for Afro-American Unity. He was his primary associate. You know, he was his main guy. You know. And to be able to meet him and talk to him and get to know him at the level that I did is something that to me was like, you know, I can't believe this is happening almost, you know what I mean? So how that happened was we inherited a study group. And when I say me, I'm talking about myself and brother Kwesi Osafo, who is now an ancestor. Myself and brother Kwesi Osafo inherited study group originally known as the Long Beach Study Group out here in Southern California. It was organized in 1989 after the first ASCAC conference, because Dr. Ben and the others told the people who were there to go home and start study groups, you know, so that we could become reacquainted with ourselves, right? So Baba Olufemi Viltz, Baba James, what's Baba James' last name? Forgive me for not being able to call Baba James' last name. But in any case, they came and started the Long Beach Study Group. And starting in 1989, they were meeting every Thursday night talking about Black things, you know. And I came around in 2006, bruh, you know.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Almost 20 years after they got started, and they were still meeting. And then in 2009, after watching myself and brother Kwesi work for a little while, they decided to take a vacation and turn the group over to us.
All right.
So myself and brother Kwesi inherited the study group in 2009 and began doing our work through the study group. Began doing our work through the study group. I forgot the question, brother. I started going off on that. Give me refresh me.
Well, basically to link, I guess, the the mentorship, if you will, and how you reserve that conflict. Yeah.
Let me jump right back in, because I know the study group I was talking about, because Earl Grant came into our study group in 2012. He came into our study group, and I didn't know who he was when he arrived, but he arrived surrounded by 4 warrior scholar brothers I knew, surrounding him in a formation, you know. So when he I didn't know he was coming. My partner hadn't told me he was coming that day, but I saw them come through the door in formation, and I knew just by the formation that he was royalty. You know, you can tell.
Yeah.
So as Kwesi walked past me, I said, "Who is that?" And he said, "That's Earl 5X." And then I just did a double take, like, what? You know. Because I immediately recognized the name. You know, I'm a serious enough student about Malcolm to recognize Earl 5X, you know, when I hear it. And it struck me in that moment that I didn't know anything about him. I hadn't heard anything about him that wasn't connected to Malcolm. I didn't know he was alive. And the last thing I expected was he would be walking through the door at my study. You know? So he took the and at this point he's an 80-year-old man. So he takes a seat at the front of the study group, and I couldn't even tell you what was on the program that night, but we had we published a 2-month schedule, you know, in advance, so you know people could see what we were studying. In other words, we were serious about the work that we were doing. So he sat in on a good session, let us know that he enjoyed what he saw, after he
Wow.
attended, and that he wanted to come back and teach.
Mm.
So
Wow.
exactly. So we
Exactly.
like,
Wow.
real, for real. And
Wow.
so from that point, we made arrangements for him to come back to our study group about a dozen different times to teach on a range of topics. And this man was a true polymath,
Oh, wow. Wow.
He's an
Okay.
engineer in his own right. He went and got an advanced degree from MIT after he left after he separated from Malcolm. He's a scientist and a physicist. When he found out that I was an engineer, he asked me, "What do you know about plasma physics?"
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
Wow.
I said, well, I know a little bit,
Okay.
I talked about a shuttle flight experiment that I helped design that interacted with the space plasma, and that's not a normal conversation to be having with people.
No, definitely not.
Especially not somebody with such a deep connection, to Malcolm and the movement and things like that. You know what I mean? So I'm watching myself have this conversation with him, if you know what I'm saying,
Right. Right on.
and I'm just marveling at the uniqueness of it, and the specialness of it, and that led to many other conversations with him, right? So to get to the heart of the matter, when I wrote a paper that I originally submitted, I think in 2015, but I was submitting this paper to a conference, a Black academic conference in 2017. And it was a paper about Malcolm, on Malcolm's teachings and how I had been inspired by them, and how I felt Malcolm was calling on us to move past race-based thinking, in a broad way,
Right.
And I wanted, since I had made this connection with Professor Grant, and I had his phone number, I figured that before I go and present this paper and have this conversation about my thoughts on Malcolm's teachings, why don't I have a conversation with Professor Grant about it?
Right.
To see what he thinks, get his critical take on it and everything, So I called and asked, because he was actually living with a friend of mine out here who was his primary associate, looking out for him as an elder, brother, much appreciated, brother Tahuti. So I got to go over to his house. I sent him the paper in advance. It was, I think, about a 9-page paper. He read it in advance. When I got there, he was prepared for the conversation. So we had an hour and a half conversation about my paper. And I was centering, my work was centering around Malcolm's teachings from Mecca, the letters that he wrote, calling on us to advance our thinking, so that then speaks to how he helped me resolve what I described as a potential conflict between Malcolm's teachings and the teachings of Qaeda. And what I mean by that is that from Mecca, Malcolm was telling us that we need a new system of reason and logic. We can't use the oppressor's logic to defeat the oppressor. You got to have different strategies.
Certainly not.
You got to have a different strategy.
That's right.
So he was specifically advising us to evolve beyond the propaganda, generally speaking, but also propaganda of race-based thinking. There's more to it than just the color of somebody's skin. And that's not hostile to the idea of blackness or anything. It's just to say that if we want different results in the struggle, we got to try something different. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over and hoping for a new and better outcome. So in Qaeda, though, Qaeda is grounded in what Dr. Karenga refers to as unbudging blackness.
Okay. All right.
So for a time, I was concerned that as much as I was, believing in the Nguzo Saba as the path to lead us, to greater things, I was also had a concern that Qaeda is grounding in what Karenga refers to as unbudging blackness might limit its effective as a forward strategy. You know, I thought Malcolm was calling on us to evolve in a different way. So what then happened was that was part of that paper that I wrote. That conversation and addressing that concern was part of the paper. So I had the opportunity to talk to Professor Grant about that as well. And he shared his perspective on that, he thought I was correct in my interpretation of what Malcolm had been teaching us. But he was able to explain that even then, Malcolm advanced that, but he knew that there would be problems to people embracing that. And that's even written about in his autobiography, that he understood that the people would be reluctant to accept, some of the new things that he was teaching. And Dr. Grant, as we came to refer to him, Professor Grant got me to see that, to put it in the simplest terms, borrowing from Kwame Nkrumah, you got to meet the people where they are to build on what they know. And our people are grounded in an understanding of ourselves as Black people. Now, we're not going to change that, he said, anytime soon. And it would take something very dramatic, he said, to happen in order for us to change that. So you gotta meet the people where they are. So what that then caused me to do was to look deeper at Kawaida, or look back at Kawaida. And that made me recall that in Kawaida, Blackness isn't a racial idea. Blackness is an expansive cultural idea. Right? Okay. It's not, what I was railing against was this diminished conception of ourselves that we get through race. And I did this sort of as an exercise, brother, in my study group. I would ask Black people, what does it mean to be Black? What does your Blackness mean? Just as a way of having our people share their heart, what they think about themselves, because our motto in the study group was, what you'll do for yourself depends on what you think about yourself. And what you think about yourself depends on what you know about yourself. Right. And what you know about yourself, brother, begins with what you call yourself. So who are you and what does that mean? That was our regular question, and in asking people what Blackness means to them, what we found was that a lot of us carry a diminished conception of what it means to be us, and they reveal that by responding to that question with stereotypes, that ground us in how this society views us, you don't
puts us in the box.
Exactly. We weren't getting as many. We got some. Our people we're not completely lost, we would get some elevated responses, about our history and our contributions and things like that. But we didn't get as much as is required for us to be who we want to be and have the conditions that we want to live in this world, right? So my conversation with Professor Grant then made me look back at Kawaida and the conception of Blackness that Dr. Karenga brings forward in that. And it occurred to me that in order for us to evolve beyond race-based thinking or the limitations of it, we got to begin with something that gives us the most highly elevated conception of who we are. That's possible. Okay. Right. So when I accept the irrefutable fact that our people are grounded in Blackness and very comfortable as Black people, well, then if we're going to elevate, well, then let's connect with the most elevated conception of Blackness that's out there, and
makes sense.
And let's use that then, to help to elevate us, So that then explains, how this connects with that, because Professor Grant was able to help me see that what I thought may have been a conflict in the teachings between Dr. Karenga and Minister Malcolm wasn't really a conflict at all. It was more a question of perspective, from the way that I was looking at it. And with that elder's insight, and assistance, I was able to resolve that and reconnect with the teachings of Kawaida in the most meaningful way. and get back on the path of, making that connection with that STEM, and using it to promote the teachings in the most meaningful way to help elevate us,
Okay. Right on. Right on. And brother, you mentioned, Professor Grant is pretty much your mentor, correct?
Well,
I
I
mean,
wouldn't.
you.
I would say that we had a mentoring relationship for the time that
Okay.
I was able to be around him.
Okay.
I didn't get nearly as close to him as those other four brothers, that were
Mm,
around him, who marched him in the room.
right. Right.
Like I said, he lived with one of those brothers,
Mm,
and the other brother, that was brother Tahuti Kambui, and then
okay.
brother Okiro Damani. He was the one that told him about our study group,
Mm, okay.
and brother Kwesi Osafo was my co-director of the study group. So
Okay.
they had a longer relationship with him, and certainly I know Okira and Tahuti would certainly say that they had a relationship like that with him. I was just lucky to have a
Mm.
few dozen conversations with him,
Oh, okay. Okay.
uh,
All right.
and had the opportunity to sit at his feet, and get him to share his humble wisdom, and
Right.
experience with me. It's truly one of the highlights of my life, being able to have that association with him.
Okay, well, your same experience with Professor Grant. I had that with Kwame Ture, better known, I guess, more popularly known as Stokely Carmichael, and I
Yeah,
met him
yeah,
on the continent of Africa, in Ghana, matter of fact. And throughout the years afterwards, we keep in touch with each other, and he'd always send an encouragement word. Nothing too long,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I could say that I had a similar relationship as you had with Professor Grant.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the things that I admired about you. You shared that previously, and it made me want to be like you when I grow up. Uh, to be able to
my
have
wife
that kind
said,
of
my
connection.
wife would tell you, you want back with a pause on that.
Well, that's
Right on,
that's
brother.
that's part of their role for us to keep us humble. You know what I mean?
Oh
But
yeah,
I mean, I'm also thankful to have had the relationship that
absolutely.
I had with Dr. Karanga. He's a world historical figure as well.
Right.
But that association with Professor Grant, that was so unexpected.
Mm.
And I mean, I still blink twice, and when I think about it,
Oh
uh,
wow,
be able to
that's
have that,
beautiful, bro.
that that association with him. So yeah, that's one of the highlights of my life, brother. I'm proud of that one.
Right on, brother. Next question, brother. Your work also seeks to address what you refer to as challenges toward advancing Kawaida that include responding to controversies associated with Dr. Kranger related to his conviction in the US organization and the Black Panther Party conflict, which, definitely I share part of that legacy. But explain that.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you in the simplest terms. I've always thought that it was so tragically unfortunate that 60-year-old issues were
Yeah.
still being able to sow division, within
Mm.
our community,
Right.
and I didn't know about all of these things at all when I first got connected to the teachings. When I first met Dr. Karanga, I wasn't familiar with this part of the history, and I've since criticized myself for not becoming more familiar with the whole story, before I dove into it so much. You know what I mean?
Right.
But the more I became familiar with the conflict, the more appalled I became that it was a continuing thing. You know, when I came to understand the role that the COINTEL program played in deliberately creating the division,
Yeah.
I couldn't understand
Mhm.
how people were still allowing it to be successful. You know,
Right.
to me that just boggled my mind. So, and then it seemed to be in conflict with the ethical teachings.
Mhm.
That I was wrapping myself up in. Through Kawaida.
Mm.
And it was troubling. You know, um, and I didn't feel that there had been an effective response to it from
Mm.
either side, you know.
Okay. All right.
And so we set out to address some of those things. Of course, we're talking about the Us Black Panther Party conflict, and we're talking about Dr. Karenga's conviction and things. The Us Black Panther Party conflict is easiest to address, I think. So I'll begin with that, and that's a simple matter for people who know the history of a conflict that was created intentionally in the midst of the revolution that these 20-something-year-olds at the time sought to wage against the United States government. And we now know, in retrospect, with praise and respect to the people who waged that battle on our behalf, that the government was much better at that type of thing and much more equipped, with the tools and the resources, far better than we were on our side, and we suffered a range of losses as a result of that. With organizations being infiltrated and all types of things happening. So there was conflict that led to the loss of life and all of those things, but it was instigated, right? And a lot of claims were made about Dr. Karenga being an informant and all of those types of things. And what I found when I first heard about those things, I was so alarmed that I almost jumped up and walked out of the room.
Oh wow! Okay.
And I learned about him for the first time while I was in an US organization meeting. And I came to the meeting. I came to the US organization with a deep respect and appreciation for the Panthers, because growing up in Detroit, we had a Panther Party chapter in Detroit, and that's part of my earliest memories of my childhood. Seeing the Panthers in the community and understanding that if something was going to go down, my mom wasn't going to call the police. My mom was going to call the Panthers.
Right on.
That was how it was, in the community back then. So I came to the organization with an appreciation for them and what they had done, So when I heard these accusations that Dr. Karenga had been accused of, being an informant and all of this kind of stuff, I was alarmed. I was rocked to my core, because here I am sitting in, the organization meeting and everything. And, my first thought was, if this stuff is true, I can't be a part of this, but then it occurred to me that I said, if it's true, I don't know if it's true. So, instead of jumping up and running out, what I need to do is use my ability to look into things and find out what this is all about. So I then did my own research, looking into the claims and everything that was said that he was supposed to have done and all of that, and I came to my own conclusions that two things were true. One, a whole lot of that stuff was lies, and then two, some of that stuff was just stuff that goes down in days of war. You know what I mean?
Right.
There are things that people do when they're in that moment that people who aren't in that moment are in no position to judge.
Right.
And I certainly don't know how I would have responded to some of the things that were happening at the time. And I know that when we've engaged in our battles, within our neighborhoods and stuff, we did certain things, in battle. That's just part of what you do when you're in battle. So I say that to say that I didn't find the same fault that people were laying on Dr. Karenga. In fact, the brother, what is his name? Clee Shaheed Sloan, formerly known as Clee Bone Sloan. He produced the documentary film called Bastards of the Party. I think it came out in 2009. And in that film, he shared a similar journey. He shared how he had been raised, because he was raised out here, and he was either Crip or Blood. All due respect, I wish I could remember which, but I can't. I just know that he was part of that, and he did the documentary to figure out where all of that conflict came from, and it took him back, to the Us Black Panther Party conflict and the gang warfare and stuff from the 60s, as a foundation to it all. And in that film, he examined the accusations made against Dr. Karenga in a manner that I was doing, to see if there, because he had been raised to accept him as truth, and he mentioned that he always had, but he had occasion to have conversation with Geronimo Gijaga,
yes,
who, of course, was the minister of defense of the LA Black Panther Party when all of this conflict was going down. And he explains on film, even has Geronimo on film in that documentary saying, nah, all of that stuff they're accusing them of, that ain't what really was happening. That's all part of the myth, that's all part of the myth. And that's all part of the deliberate stuff that was done to create the confusion. And it's still working. He didn't say all of that, but this is what you infer from all of that. It's working. So Brother Clee was able to see that and recognize that he needed to adjust his perspective on things. And that's the same insight that I gained when I looked into that all of that stuff ain't what it seems. And you got somebody's uncle's cousin's brother who knew somebody who was a neighbor, back in the movement in the 60s, who are telling them things, and people just passing these rumors and myths on, and it's continuing to have the same divisive impact that it was intended to. And in my judgment, nobody who's serious about our people should be okay with that, So we have sought to address that. The question about Dr. Karenga's conviction is a little bit more difficult to address because of the fact of the conviction. But we engage that not from a perspective to try to deny that it happened or claim his innocence. We engage it from a perspective of, well, if the conviction is what it claims to be, and he's guilty of what he's been accused of, what does that mean to us here 60 years later? What does that mean to us after he has served, I think almost 5 years, almost 6 years, or 6 years in prison for those things that he was accused of? What does that mean in relation to the 60 years of rigorous scholarship that he has developed since then? Do we judge him on that alone, or do we look at him over the totality of his life and measure his shortcomings with his contributions and then put that in the proper perspective to determine how we relate to all of those things? In other words, just as much as I was put off by this continuing conflict over these rumors between us and Black Panthers, I was hurt, brother, by the way young people would come into our study group in November and December every year. And while we're trying to have a conversation about the depth and beauty of the 7 principles, they say, well, we're not interested in that. We're not interested in anything to do with Kwanzaa because, Dr. Karenga did this and he did this and, the conflicts and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm sitting there like, it's such a tragedy that those events, real or not, can be used today to cause people to willfully turn their back on such wonderful and depthful and meaningful teachings. So we decided again, then that needs to be addressed then. And this conversation needs to be had where, the people who raise these concerns need to be challenged, on what is the real relevance of these accusations that are being made about Dr. Karenga, to the holiday. What is the relevance? Maybe connection to it. Kwanzaa isn't the Dr. Karenga holiday. It's a holiday that celebrates, our history, community, culture, all of those things. Is much deeper than that, So we challenge the people who limit it to that, but at the same time try to expand the conversation. That's another one of the reasons why we talk about the people who helped Dr. Karenga create the holiday. It's not just the Dr. Karenga holiday. That's not to diminish the contribution to it, but it's to say that it's bigger than all of that.
I know. Well, brother, I also want to add that of course, I was part of the LA cadre with Kwaku during that was the second wave of it, if you will, of the Panther movement.
Yeah.
With Sharif Abdullah, with B. Kwaku Duran, who was the coordinator of Southern California chapter, and then a lead co-founder of the Panther Vanguard, which I was a part of. And during that time, again, I mentioned about the brother who invited me to the US organization, and then also Kwaku and Sharif both spoke there as well. And one thing that I came away with was that we cannot carry past pains in our present struggle for collective advancement.
Right.
And that speaks to that, I believe.
It absolutely does. And I guess our argument is also that we have to be thoughtful, and led by, depthful and thoughtful analysis of things, and not just led by emotions of it. We have to ask the questions, well, how does all of that relate to now? And not just pass on negative feelings just for the sake of passing them on. What does that mean? If somebody's gonna tell me a story about Dr. Karanga, something Dr. Karanga supposedly did, while I'm trying to have an uplifting conversation about Kwanzaa, I need to ask them, well, what's the relevance of that? How does that relate to this? And what's your point for sharing that? Are you sharing that with me to somehow diminish the depth and meaning of this other stuff? What's the point of that? And
how do we move forward?
Are you trying to uplift our people with that? Or are you contributing to some other effort? Because to me, the people who are doing the work of COINTELPRO today are the people who are still passing that division around.
Absolutely.
And of course, our earliest connection was through you being part of the new generation, the reincarnation of the Panther Party. And our earliest exchanges were about the need, to get over that stuff, and not continue to allow ourselves to be victims of it. So yeah, brother, we like-minded on several of these related points here,
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Again, there's an old African proverb say, polluted waters will cleanse themselves as long as they keep running.
Yeah. Yes. Keep doing the work. Sir. And, if we make recognize the need to make our own contribution, Frantz Fanon and Wretched of the Earth, which is a sacred text for us, said that every generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission and either fulfill it or betray it, And I see this as representing my generation's contribution, to carry the work forward. Dr. Karanga and the original Panthers and all of them, they made their contribution, and to the extent that they have or have not resolved all of the conflict issues, leave some work for us to do, in the next generation. And either we can sit up and point fingers and talk about what could, should, and would happen, or we can be an active part of it,
Right on.
And of course, that's where our paths first crossed on all of this, and continue, because this work represents a continuation of that.
Right on, brother. Beautifully said as well, man. Now, what is the status of your new mobile app, Ngozo Saba 365, the online community mentioned in your work? And do you have plans to expand the function and content of those platforms this year or so? What is your focus?
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you asked that too. We are actively working on building on that. This all came about. We started on this in 2023. And at that time, it was part of a 3-year plan leading up to the 60th anniversary of Kwanzaa. And what we envisioned was adding to the work every year, so that when we get to 2026 and we're celebrating the 60th anniversary, we want to have something big and beautiful to celebrate,
Okay. All right.
So in 2023, we created the first version of the Kwanzaa.org website, which was the beginning of the fulfillment of our full vision for what Kwanzaa should be represented to be on the internet, with all of the bells and whistles and all of the content and all of those things. So we set up what was then just the core of the website. and we've continued to add to it. In 2024, we released Nguzo Saba 365, which is the app, which is an accompaniment to the website. We also launched nguzosaba365.org, which is the website that's specific to the app and our work, but is connected to Kwanzaa and the Kwanzaa.org website. There's a lot of shared content between the two, but Kwanzaa.org focuses on the holiday, right?
Okay.
And
Right.
nguzosaba365.org is where we focus on our app and our continuing work. So when we released Nguzo Saba 365, the intent behind the app is for us to first engage modern technology, right? We have these devices attached to the end of our hands for, several hours throughout the day, right? Many of us are addicted to them,
Yes.
So it only seemed reasonable in our mind as STEM professionals that we should create an app, that where we could advance these teachings through that, through that medium. In our search, we only found one other app that had been developed that was in any way connected to the 7 principles. But it was sorely limited, right? So we saw a need that we could fulfill. So we created a vision for an app, and it was originally conceived to be something that would grow in stages, right?
Okay. All right.
We would begin as a sharing of information and sharing of daily or weekly quotes that relate to one of the principles, just so that we can have an active engagement with it. We have partner organizations around the country that we are affiliated with and are partners with us in this work. So we distribute information about those organizations and the work that they're doing also through our app. Like, for example, we have a partnership with the Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Network. And they operate the Detroit People's Food Co-op. So we are able to share the weekly information that comes out for the Detroit People's Food Co-op through our app. And we will expand on that as we go. So in the initial offering, and it's available for download through all of the, through the App Store and Google and all of that, you get a daily or weekly quote communication and newsletter, about what these different organizations are doing. We introduced an initiative called Nguzo Saba in Motion, where we're not just talking about the principles, in terms of what they mean, but we are highlighting organizations that are actually utilizing the principles and putting them in motion, in a meaningful way. So we share stories of how the 7 principles are being put in motion. So that was in the initial offering. What we're working on now and what we're preparing to do, we've been hosting a Saturday series on STEM and culture every Saturday from noon to 2 p.m. California time, where we share updates on what we're doing and engage different topics. Well, we're about to change the format of that and make that our working session. So instead of just doing a presentation or almost a podcast, we're going to make that working session, because we have this story with the Damu family or the Carr family, the children, from the first Kwanzaa that we have to develop into content for our Kwanzaa Kids program this year. We have other STEM-based content that we want to develop so that we can launch an update to our app and an expansion, a major expansion to our nguzosaba365.org website for Kwanzaa this year. So we are working on those things, brother. And in October, we're going to have a launch of a new release of our app and a major update to our website. And we're going to talk about the Carr children and their contribution to the holiday throughout the season. We're going to talk about our efforts to use Nguzo Saba 365, the app, to promote the 7 principles throughout the year during the Kwanzaa season. And then we're going to carry that into next year to continue doing our work. So that's what we have upcoming and what we're working on.
Oh, that's fantastic, brother. In your book, you suggest that the applied value focus of Kawida and the Ngozo Saba could potentially replace race-based thinking, which you talked about earlier, as a
Yeah.
way of understanding each other. Explain that, if you don't mind, again, or
Well,
expand on it.
well, let me start with this: that we've been trying to organize ourselves around the idea of race for a long time,
Hmm.
and I think it's fair to say that we haven't been as successful as we wanted to be
Right.
organizing around that. So it's not that I'm hostile to the idea of blackness. It
Hmm.
just occurred to me that if we're going to produce better results, we need to find another way, another strategy, you know.
Mm. Right.
And then again, with Minister Malcolm's teachings, calling on us to evolve beyond that thinking and find something else.
Hmm.
Um, Matter of fact, Malcolm wrote, or Malcolm at a panel discussion at Harvard in March 1964. That was when Minister Malcolm talked about how we needed to, how did he say it? We needed to develop a new system of reason and logic
Hmm.
that
Okay.
departs
Right.
from our oppressor's system of reason and logic. Well, Dr. Karanga, he was just coming into prominence at that time,
Hmm.
studying and beginning to do his work. Well, he interpreted Malcolm's teaching not where he said we need a new system of reason and logic. Dr. Karanga interpreted that as saying we need a new language and
Mm.
logic,
Okay.
in order to do this. So I began to see Kawaida as a manifestation of
Mm.
that,
Okay.
as that new language and logic that Minister Malcolm said we needed. And I just felt that it needed to be connected with modern technology in a meaningful way, so that could be conveyed to our people.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
with Kawaida's focus on applied values, what I saw in it was a deeper and a more meaningful connection than the race ideal, right?
Mm.
Because
Right.
uh, unity, real unity, is based on
Mhm.
shared values and goals. You know,
Right. Right. Hmm.
one of the things that I
Exactly.
learned in our examination of how Black people understand Blackness is that we don't have a shared conception of what
Mm.
it means to be Black. We don't
Right.
have a common conception of what it means to be Black. We got a lot of different ideas, a lot of different things that we focus on what it means to be Black. What that means in practice is that we're like we're like a baseball team trying to operate from different playbooks. In other
Okay.
words,
Right.
if we don't have a shared understanding of what it
Yeah.
means to be us, well then
Right.
how can we unite around what it means to be us? You know,
Right.
we got different perceptions of Blackness pulling us in different directions. You
Hmm.
know, so that's one of the things that keeps us divided. But shared values is the basis of real unity, right?
Right.
There's no
Absolutely.
there's no disputing that. So to me, it seemed that if we focus on that, that begins by requiring that we don't just come to our community as Black people,
Hmm.
but we come to our community as principled Black people,
Mm.
you know,
Okay.
meaning that we come prepared to do the types of things that will uplift our
Right.
community, and don't come bringing any of the things that are going to diminish our
Mhm.
community in any way, you know.
Right.
So if we unite then around those shared values, well, then that precedes over skin color, that precedes over the race idea, you
Right.
know. And this also occurred to me, brother,
Hmm.
that the people the people we are struggling against, their ancestors, they gave the world this race idea,
Hmm.
and
Right.
and and they did that to stir a certain amount of confusion,
Hmm.
so more people would support their agenda, than they would if they weren't confused. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
Right.
So it was
Right.
created to sow confusion. And it occurred to me, bro, that they
Hmm.
don't even use that idea, the race idea, as the basis for their organizing. In other words, the people who are running the world based on shared values. What does that mean?
Mm.
That
Right.
means that they got some of everybody on their team.
Mm.
We can certainly agree that white people are running things, but they got Barack Obama on their team. You know, they got Chinese on their team. They got people from everywhere on their team. Their unity is based on shared values and shared goals. If you share their values, their goals, regardless of what you look like, you can be on their team. You know, so it occurred to me that if we want better results, we got to go with a deeper strategy. This also ties and was most inspired, I must say, by my reading of Sun Tzu and the Art of War, and Sun Tzu's teachings about how we got to find a what's the language he used? I forget the exact, but it's a moral. We got to have a winning moral argument, you know, to be able to unite the people, you know, in order to generate the numbers that are necessary to win. So, I'll summarize it with this: that victory is ultimately a numbers game, right? You got to win by drawing in the most people. You got to draw the most people to your team, to your ideas, you know. And it occurred to me that even if we were able to get all of the black people, that's still not the majority. You know, we need in order to create the good world that we want, we gotta convince more than just black people, you know.
That's true. So absolutely.
That made me realize that if we're focusing on the end game, then it's a lot bigger than what we've been conditioned, how we've been conditioned to engage in, you know. And again, it's not to speak against blackness. You know, I love being black. You know, the black is me is on my T-shirt.
All right. Yes, sir.
I'm just looking in a thoughtful way for a deep strategy in which to engage these ideas for better outcome. You know?
Right. Yeah. Oftentimes, people try to look for how to carry theory into practical application for the collective world, if you will, because you know, one elevation of one people will not do the world any good.
Yeah,
as we've seen.
Well, we have to start where we are and build among our own people. You know what I mean? There's no getting around that, and we owe that to ourselves and to the people who brought us into being to do our first work amongst our people. You know, so I don't speak against anybody who does that, especially people who are doing that in their own way and in an objectively good way. You know, we all have to start amongst our own people, but if we don't recognize that ultimately, you know, I mean, my experience with NASA, brother, changed me. You know,
I can imagine.
The very first time the very first shuttle flight experiment I helped design, and seeing that experiment on orbit with Earth passing by in the background. You know, you may have heard astronauts talk about what it's like to get up into space, to go on orbit and then look back on Earth, and how that view transforms them, you know. And of course, I didn't go up into space, but I had an occasion to see the first experiment that I worked on in space with the cargo bay doors of the shuttle open, and then the Earth passed by in the background.
Wow,
you know?
wow, that's incredible.
I was blown away. I was frozen by it. And what I mean is that it gave me a perspective on the world that that made all of these conflicts seem so stupid.
Oh yeah, so minuscule.
Yeah, I mean, we're on this little rock, and it's little and you know, floating around literally out in the middle of nowhere. You know, but creation has given us everything we need to live a good life on here. Yet we're fighting amongst ourselves over things. You know, how silly is that? You know, and I mean, I felt like I needed to go and sit in a dark room and just think. You know, when,
I can imagine.
So this is ultimately all of that coming forward. You know. Because that caused me to think deeply about my place in the world, and you know, the world that I would like to help create for my children, and what our obligations are while we're here and everything. And it seems to me that in return for the gift of life and for this experience that we're having here, you know, eternal spirits having this human experience, that we should be using this time where we're here to make this place the best place possible, you know. So that's where all of this, thought and reflection comes from, and what is ultimately trying to contribute to creating the good world that we want and deserve to live in.
Right on. Right on, brother. Right on.
Yeah.
We call that, Quaker used to call that cooperational humanism. Where,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes,
Brother,
indeed.
final two questions. You also suggest in your book that your study of Kawaida led you to understand why all Black people don't get along, and you kind of spoke to that a little bit, and
Yeah.
why we have not been successful or as successful as we would like to in our efforts to organize Blackness.
Yeah.
Share your perspective.
Well, and I have touched on that, but
Yeah.
I'm always happy to add to it.
Okay.
And I'll do it simply. The proverbial, one of the proverbial questions is, how come all Black people can't get along?
Right.
We've asked ourselves that question in organizational meetings for decades and centuries, it seems. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it seems to me that the answer is simply this:
Mm-hmm.
all Black people don't get along because all Black people don't share the same values. And if you don't share the same values, then you can't get along.
Right.
You
Right.
have
That's right.
competing. You find
Competing
yourself having
values.
competing values, competing
Right.
perspectives, and we are not a monolith,
Contradictions. Oh yes.
nor should we be expected to
Mm-hmm.
be. We have amongst us the greatest genetic diversity on earth. So
Absolutely.
why
The
should we
original people.
also have the greatest
Mm-hmm.
thought diversity on earth?
Mm-hmm.
We
Right.
and of course, what this human experience teaches us is that our local experiences frame our perspective. You got to be sensitive to your environment, and you got to respond to that. So
Right.
the concerns that Black people have in South Central Los Angeles are
Mm-hmm.
slightly different than
Right.
the concerns that Black people are going to have, in Europe or parts of Africa or other parts of the world. We share some that are in common, of course, for
Right.
our sustenance and daily existence. But there
Right.
are local issues that we have to respond to,
Oh yeah.
So our
Absolutely.
focus is going to change based on that, So, in other words, it occurred to me, brother, that all
Mm-hmm.
Black people shouldn't get along.
Right. Okay.
Why should
can't
we
can't
expect
take
all Black people
everybody.
to get along? You
Right.
know,
That's
uh,
true. That's true.
what that does is that assails the creation of the idea of race as a source of confusion for us. We trying to do the impossible,
Right.
trying to figure out how to get all Black people together. Well, when has that ever happened?
Right.
When
Right.
when have all white people ever been together?
Good point.
You,
Yes.
we
Absolutely.
can say that they're working together to run the world, but they're working together with a lot of people from other, cultural backgrounds too,
Mm-hmm. That's
even
true.
in the midst of their own conflict between themselves.
That's, that's so true.
When has color ever defined unity in practice?
That's true. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
has our
Mm-hmm.
pursuit of that been an example of us, being manipulated by somebody else's propaganda?
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to get past other people's propaganda, like Minister Malcolm said?
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly one of those things. When you examine it, when you think about it, brother,
Mm-hmm.
yes, you begin to see that there are layers to this that make the simplified way we've engaged these things seem inadequate.
Right.
Certainly,
Right.
if we're trying to think ourselves out of our current predicament and into a better situation,
Right.
the simplistic analysis just won't do.
Right on.
So
Right on.
that's I mean, I could add more to it, but I certainly think that when it occurred to me that we don't get along because we don't share the same values, and
Right.
we're not going to share the same values. There will always be Black Democrats and Black Republicans,
Yes,
Black
absolutely.
conservatives, Black
Right.
liberals. There will always be that, and there
Yeah.
should be. You know,
Mhm.
and we got to build. We got to build with those people who we share values with. So that's how I see Kawaida and his focus on values,
Mhm.
providing a potential replacement for race-based thinking. In terms of how we organize.
Right on.
Certainly in our organizations, we got to be among people who share our values,
Mhm.
right?
Right on. Right.
I mean,
That's right.
that's another indication of the essential need for us to be, to understand the need to unite around shared values over even shared history or shared skin color. You know,
True.
uh,
That's true.
that because in the absence of shared values, those things can be debilitating. In other words, those people who look like us who bring hurt and harm to our community cause us a range of emotional and psychological and organizational challenges. Because we have a connection to them and how they look and who they are and their history and all of that. But the fact that their practice, brings harm to us creates a conflict for us. Sometimes we want to turn them over to the system.
Yeah.
Other times we got to figure out how to deal with them internally, but they pose a problem for us.
Right.
People who don't share our values pose a range of problems for us, whether they're inside our community or outside our community. But I certainly say
Right.
that there's no doubt to be left that all meaningful organization and unity is based on shared values. And the fact that we don't all share the same values is the sole reason why all Black people don't get along.
Wow. Well said, brother, as always. And what I want to talk about too, in conclusion, you have so much going on. What are your future plans as you build on various ways to reach our people and reach humanity and to improve their lives? What future plans do you have?
Well, we're going to continue doing the work that we've started, in this merger between technology, the teachings of Kawaida, focusing on the Kawaida conception of Blackness. We don't claim to be we're not affiliated with the US organization or anything like that. So we don't claim to be an outlet, for all of Kawaida teachings or anything like that. Our work is focused on the interpretation of STEM that I was asked to write, for Kawaida, and the Kawaida conception of Blackness primarily, is what we focus on. So we want to continue to promote those teachings. We want to continue our study so that we can find other sources of African wisdom, to draw from and to use in our work. We want to continue focusing on developing our children and reaching our children with the beauty of Kwanzaa, the beauty of the beauty and depth of the Nguzo Saba, and the beauty of African culture more broadly. We want to continue inspiring our people to reconnect with an understanding of ourselves as STEM innovators and not just STEM consumers, or STEM targets, as the case may be. And we want to continue producing content that our people respond well to. We hope to continue building what becomes an organization that reflects these teachings applied in the most meaningful way. I'm going to be working this year on texts related to the principle of Ujamaa, cooperative economics. That in addition to the STEM area, that's one of the areas in Kawaida that I think is underdeveloped, right? We don't have meaningful examples of Ujamaa being applied, where we got, Black businesses that are in existence and working in a collective way that represents the principles and the teachings. That's not to say that there aren't organizations that are representing Ujamaa. That would be disrespectful to suggest anything. I'm just suggesting that it needs to be done at a larger scale. We certainly need more resources within our community. We need our own facilities. We need the ability to manufacture our own things. So we're intending to continue promoting all of those initiatives, Brother Malik, and doing our best to be an example of it, and grow our organization, the African Restoration Project, as we continue doing exactly those things.
Right on, brother. Right on, man. Just keep up the great work you're doing, brother. And for those who want to contact you, for various inquiries, as well as your social media, how can people reach out to you, contact you, and again, give your websites?
Websites are Kwanzaa.org, Nguzosaba365.org. And I'm Harold Shujaa Baker on Facebook and Instagram. Let me see what else. And most directly, you know, we got the contact form on the Kwanzaa.org website and the Nguzo Laba 365 website. You can contact me through there or through Facebook. Yeah, I spend more time than I care to admit, in in the social media world, because that's where the people are. You know,
That's what
so
the people are. Yeah.
people out there, and sometimes get drawn in a bit longer than I plan to for the day, but that's all part of engaging with the people and meeting the people where they are. So that's the best way to reach out to me, brother.
Right on, brother. It's been such a pleasure, brother. It was a long-awaited conversation because I've always wanted to, chop it up with you, see what you have going on, and really delve into your brilliant mind, brother. And again, the Most High and the Creator is going to continue to grow that mind. I hope the same thing happened with myself as well. And thank you for all the work you do in the community, brother.
I appreciate that, brother, and likewise to you, man. Yes, indeed, it is a long-awaited conversation, and I look forward to the next occasion. I'll keep you informed on the work that we're doing. Certainly, I'd like to come back and
absolutely,
and have a conversation with you before we do our next release.
Okay.
And let you know about that and be able to show some examples of that. But I thank you too for the work that you're doing and for the opportunity to have this conversation with you today.
Oh, thank you, brother. And I greet you, brother Baragani, and I'll talk to you real soon, man.
Asante Sana and Tutawanana, my brother.
Yes, sir. You take care, brother.
All right. Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings. Again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today for episode 50 of the Vanguard Show podcast. Excellent guest, excellent brother who's doing wonderful work. Make sure you follow him. I'm going to take a little hiatus, got to deal with some personal and some personal issues and plans, work on some projects I have working on. But again, we'll be back probably in a couple of months, actually. And I also want to shout out before I get off here, Brother James Tracy, who has the book Southern Panther, Conversations with Malik Rahim. I'm one of the contributors on that book. The release date is April 1st of this year. Make sure you go check it out. I'll be headed down to New Orleans pretty soon for the book launch. But again, shout out to James Tracy and the other contributing authors that are part of this particular project. So I'll see you real soon. It'll be a short hiatus, but look forward to seeing all of you again real soon. And if you see the video, make sure you share, comment, and just really get this great information that Brother Harold provided. Peace and blessings.